everybody. My name is Christine and I'm from the Journey Museum and Learning Center. I'm the education coordinator here, and I just felt it was really important to kind of deviate from the other videos that we've been sending out to you and make one specific to the parents. I know that we have a lot of homeschool parents who are members of our museum, but we also have parents now with the school closures that are happening who are wanting to find activities to do with their kids. And so I wanted to share some ideas with you on what you could do. So I used to be a teacher. I was a teacher for 10 years. And my favorite teaching position I had was teaching world civilizations to 6th graders. And I did a fun unit on the ancient Egyptians. So I just wanted to share with you today an activity I did with kids that lasted 2 weeks about mummifying hot dogs, but I wanted to kind of give you some tips to go with that. So always the first thing when I'm planning lessons that I think about is I have to make sure to build my child's background knowledge. So that can be something you can do at home. If you have access to some books about ancient Egypt, or even just simply researching the internet, have your child go through and find some basic information about Egypt. Now, if you're wondering what basic information they need to know to start with, I always start with geography. So have them look at a map, see that Egypt is located in Africa, show them the Nile River, talk about how civilizations would settle along rivers because they could use the river for all different purposes. And also it might be of interest is to teach them about how the Nile River was a good natural protection for them up in the north where the delta is, or off to the west where the Sahara desert was. So after they get a basic idea of the geography, also go through the time period with the ancient Egyptians. The time for the pharaohs would be from about the 32nd century BC to 332 BC. After they have the basic understanding of geography and time period, then before you go anything into mummifying hot dogs, make sure they understand a little bit about mummies itself. So first of all, pharaohs were in charge in ancient Egypt. Talk about what pharaohs were with your child. Pharaohs believed that they were gods. The Egyptians believed in many gods and they believed in the afterlife. And the pharaoh believed that in order for him to make it to the afterlife, he needed to have his body preserved in a mummy. So just make it clear to your child that the mummies were for the ancient pharaohs, not your typical day worker or a scribe or a slave or anything like that. It was for the pharaohs. So, second key point after you're teaching about the basic background knowledge is to, before you do the activity itself, is just to teach a lesson, a very short lesson with the kids about how the ancient Egyptians mummified the pharaohs. So like even here at the Journey when we have our summer camps, we don't just teach kids an activity, we teach them the concept behind the activity. So what I mean in this case is you could find a video off of YouTube where they go through the steps of how to embalm a mummy. And they teach you about all the steps about the canopic jars and the natron salt. There's even a simulation that you can find online and have the kids do it themselves. That's how simple the lesson can be. Teach them the process about mummification so they understand it. It's more than just wrapping up a mummy. And then, as a former teacher, I'm always a proponent of checking for understanding. This can be simple as asking the kids questions to make sure they understand what some of the processes were along the way. You might ask them a question like, what was the natron salt used for? Or why did they remove the organs from the body? Or how did they remove the brain? That one's a fun one. Or you can have them write down the answers to the questions if you're wanting your child to learn more about writing. So those are the first two steps before we go on to the activity itself.